Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the early dawn of a chilly November morning, the small town of Millbrook lay shrouded in a soft blanket of fog. The stillness of the air was punctuated only by the rustle of autumn leaves, the remnants of an industrious summer giving way to winter's grass. Millbrook was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, and where secrets often lay buried beneath the surface, cloaked in a veneer of normalcy. But today, that serenity shattered with the rising sun. At precisely 6:15 a.m., the sound of sirens pierced the silence, reverberating through the quaint neighborhoods lined with picket fences and aging oak trees. The Millbrook Police Department received an emergency call that was both urgent and disconcerting. A body had been discovered in the dense woods bordering Hillside Park. Officer Mark Sullivan, a 10-year veteran with the force, arrived first on the scene. His heart raced as he navigated the winding trails, the damp earth squelching beneath his footsteps. He knew the park well. Children's laughter echoed through these trails in warmer months, but today the air was laden with grim anticipation. Officers were already gathered, forming a hesitant circle as they awaited the arrival of detectives. As Sullivan stepped closer, the silhouettes of his colleagues came into focus. There, partially obscured by fallen leaves and remnants of underbrush, lay the lifeless body of a woman. Her long auburn hair sprawled out like a halo, contrasting sharply against the muted tones of the forest floor. A chill crept up Sullivan's spine. This was no accidental death. The unnatural angle of her limbs spoke of violence. He glanced around at his fellow officers, his mind racing. Millbrook's residents had never seen murder, and he knew this would mark the beginning of a dark chapter for their unsuspecting community. As the forensic team began their work, the haunting reality settled in. An unsettling truth had awakened in Millbrook, and it would take more than just determination to bring it to light. The victim. As the sun climbed higher, casting its muted glow over the crime scene, more details started to emerge, painting a portrait of the young woman sprawled among the fallen leaves. The forensic team, clad in blue jumpsuits, bent to their task with steady professionalism. Officer Sullivan stepped closer, a sense of unease gnawing at him as he tried to recall if he'd seen her around town. They identified her as Abby Lawson, a 28-year-old librarian at the Millbrook Public Library. A beloved member of the community, Abby had an infectious smile that lit up the room during book readings and story hour. Known for her kindness and unassuming demeanor, she had touched the lives of many, from preschoolers to retirees. The good-hearted librarian rarely mingled outside her routine. She lived alone in a modest home on Maple Street, sharing little of her personal life with those who crowded the library's shelves. As officers combed through her belongings, they found a small leather wallet tucked away in her jacket, revealing an ID card, remnants of cash, and an old faded photograph of her standing with a group of friends. It was apparent that they had gathered at some lively event, each face beaming with joy. Sullivan couldn't help but wonder how many of those smiling faces would share a similar shock and grief upon learning that Abby would never walk among them again. The medical examiner arrived, meticulously documenting every piece of evidence. The initial examination revealed signs of struggle. Dirt and grass stains marred Abby's once pristine clothes, and there were bruises forming on her wrist marks of a fight. Pale skin contrasted sharply against the dim colors of the forest, almost begging for answers. As the sun broke through the clouds, Illuminating the scene, the full gravity of Abby's tragic fate hung heavy in the air. With a community unprepared for brutality and confusion palpable, Sullivan resolved to uncover the truth behind Abby Lawson's final moment. He could feel it deep within him. The deeper the investigation would lead him, the more complex this case would reveal itself to be. Millbrook was a town of secrets, and Abby's life had been just one thread in a tangled web waiting to be pulled apart. The crime scene. The area surrounding Abby Lawson's body became a theater of investigation. Each detail scrutinized under the watchful gaze of the forensic team. Officer Sullivan stood by, observing as the seasoned detectives took command of the scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the perimeter, a stark line that separated the chaos of human emotion from the cold, methodical world of criminal. The grassy clearing, kissed by the previous night's frost, bore no signs of a struggle beyond the victim herself. Sullivan felt the weight of the silent sounds of birds or rustling animals, only the distant echo of footsteps on gravel. As more officers arrived, they began to spread out, canvassing the area, eyes peeled for any signs or remnants of the events that had transpired here. Detective Sarah Mitchell, known for her tenacity and insightful instincts, knelt beside the body, her brow furrowed in concentration. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and she felt that familiar tug of urgency. She gently lifted Abby's hand, revealing Morbrusinga's macabre testimony to a physical struggle. It struck her that while this quiet town was now rippled by violence, there were still countless stories intertwined in Abby's history. Investigators combed through the underbrush, turning over leaves and twigs in search of any discarded belongings that might have been overlooked in the frenzy. There, a solitary brown shoe lay just a few feet away, a dark smudge across its laces indicating it had been face down in the mud. Sullivan stepped closer, noting the size. It was a women's shoe, and he felt a pang of sorrow for the life that had been extinguished in this unsuspecting place. As the sun grew stronger, a glint caught Sullivan's eye. He knelt down to examine a small silver charm, half buried in the soil. It was a heart encircled by initials, though the markings had become indiscernible over time. Sullivan carefully pocketed it, a small token that might serve as a vital clue later. Time weighed heavy as the team worked, realizing that every second spent hovering over the scene drew them further from the answers they desperately sought. Was it possible that Abby had been stalked? Did she know her assailant? As whispers began to circulate through the gathered officers, Sullivan remained irresolute, each unanswered question amplifying a sense of urgency within. The truth lay hidden beneath the surface, and he would do everything in his power to bring it to light. Millbrook would have answers, no matter how buried they might be. The early investigation. Back at the Millbrook Police Department, the echo of a door slamming shut reverberated through the usually quiet halls. Officers gathered in the small conference room, an air of tension mingling with the scent of stale coffee as they reviewed the scant information they had gleaned from the crime scene. Detective Mitchell stood at the forefront, a whiteboard laden with sticky notes, each marked with various leads and observations. "We need to start with Abby's last known movements," she began, her voice steady but laced with urgency. Her co-workers reported she hadn't seemed herself lately, quiet, withdrawn. "We should reach out to the library staff and see if anyone noticed anything unusual." As they dissected Abby's habits, Sullivan ran through the timeline in his mind. He recalled the town meeting held just the previous week, where Abby had read a passage from her favorite book. It struck him as peculiar that someone so vibrant could fade into the background so quickly. There had to be someone in her life, or perhaps someone who had taken a vested interest in her. "We should canvass the neighborhood," Officer Sullivan suggested, glancing at the map pinned on the wall. "Talk to her neighbors, friends, anyone who might have seen her or interacted with her recently. It's possible she might have crossed paths with someone who lived nearby." The room hummed with agreement, and they split into smaller teams to maximize their reach. Sullivan teamed up with Officer Green, a newer recruit who'd come to Millbrook with aspirations of experiencing the complexities of real crime. As they drove through the picture-perfect neighborhoods, the contrast between the idyllic facades and the grim reality of Abby's demise felt jarring. They parked outside Abby's small, quaint house, the autumn leaves swirling around in a gentle breeze, almost mocking their somber mission. Its cozy charm now seemed deceptive. Sullivan knocked on the door, awaiting the sound of footsteps inside. After a few moments that felt like hours, an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Hawthorne, approached hesitantly. "Oh dear," she exclaimed, her voice quivering as she rushed to greet them. "I heard the news. Poor Abby, I can't believe it." Sullivan instantly put her at ease, quickly explaining their purpose. As they spoke, Mrs. Hawthorne shared her observations from the previous weeks, mentioning late-night lights in Abby's home and a shadowy figure she had noticed lingering nearby the night before the tragedy. A chill ran down Sullivan's spine. This was the first potential lead they had. As they left the house, the gravity of their task bore down on him. They were not only searching for answers, but also for a window into Abby's world. Each neighbor they spoke with held a piece of the puzzle, and Sullivan knew that understanding Abby's life would be crucial in unraveling the mystery thought of the crime. The dead ends. The following days blended into a blur of interviews and canvassing. Yet the more Sullivan and Officer Green interrogated Abby's friends and acquaintances, the more discouraging their findings became. While they collected snippets of information, a picture of Abby's life as a somewhat lonely yet content woman, no one seemed to have anything suspicious to report. Most only recalled her gentle smile and eagerness to help others. Officer Green, energized by the thrill of a developing investigation, was insistent they press on. After an exhausting day filled with discussions, they returned to the department with not much more than a collection of hearsay. They had checked with Abby's co-workers at the library, local coffee shops, and even frequent haunts like the local park, but their inquiries yielded little more than sympathetic glances and memories of her kindness. "You know, it feels like we're running in circles," Sullivan remarked, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Everywhere we turn seems like a dead end." Green nodded, exhaustion shadowing his youthful features. "Maybe we missed some. What about surveillance footage from the library or local businesses? Someone might have caught something." Determined not to abandon this lead, the officers requested footage from the library, hoping to find a trace of anyone who had interacted with Abby in her final days. The hours spent reviewing the grainy video were torturous, revealing nothing but ordinary scenes of library patrons browsing and checking out books. They had decided to revisit Abby's house, a place that bore witness to the life she had lived. Inside, her belongings remained untouched and eerily preserved, as if waiting for her to return. Sullivan glanced at the photographs on her mantelpiece of gatherings, vacations at the shore, and a smiling Abby surrounded by friends. It painted a picture of an isolated warmth but gave them nothing concrete to work with. As they flipped through her journals and notes, searching for hints of unease or references to mounting anxiety about someone in her life, Sullivan's heart sank deeper with each passing moment. The entries offered light anecdotes, book reviews, and reflections on her day-to-day pathways through a life so ordinary and mundane. But still, there was little to glean. As the day ended, Sullivan left the house empty-handed, conflicted between an unyielding determination to uncover the truth and the ever-looming realization that answers might remain just beyond his reach. There was a darkness settling over Millbrook, and with every dead end they encountered, Sullivan found himself grappling not only with the complexities of the case, but also with the haunting specter of Abby's unfulfilled existence. A break in the case. It was early evening when the monotony of dead ends began to shift into a sense of renewed determination. The rain outside pattered softly against the department windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop that felt oddly comforting. Sullivan was sifting through the latest reports when a familiar face stepped into the station detective, Sarah Mitchell, her expression a mix of urgency and hope. "I think we may finally have a break," she announced, brushing stray raindrops from her jacket. Sullivan leaned forward, every nerve alight with anticipation. "Tell me," he urged, already anxious to depart from the stagnant pace of the investigation. "Remember that shadowy figure Mrs. Hawthorne mentioned? I reached out to a few other neighbors nearby, and one of them noticed someone loitering around Abby's house a few nights before her death, a man, tall with dark hair. It fits the description of someone they thought looked out of place." Sullivan felt a rush of adrenaline. Did they get a name? A vehicle description? Not exactly, but another neighbor mentioned hearing a loud argument coming from Abby's house the night before. It seems she wasn't as isolated as we thought. I want us to dig deeper, look into potential suspects who might have been nearby. Determined, Sullivan and Green wasted no time. They returned to the neighborhood with a sense of purpose, asking residents if they had seen anyone matching that description. As they navigated the winding streets, they encountered a woman named Linda Somyan, who had frequented the library. She hesitated at first, but gradually opened up, her brow furrowed in concern. "I saw that man," she whispered. "He was always hanging around, not just near Abby's, but around the park, too. I called him the loner. He never spoke to anyone and had this strange energy about him. I thought he was just some weirdo, but now." She shook her head, fear etched on her face. "Did you catch his name or know where he might go?" Green pressed. "Never caught his name, but he often had a red bicycle," Linda offered, glancing around as if the air itself were tainted. "He always sat on that bench by the park, just staring." Sullivan scribbled down the details as a flicker of hope sparked within him. A specific image of the man brewing in his mind. He realized that there was more to uncover. A darker thread that connected Abby's life to this stranger. Sullivan concluded they needed to expand the search to local bicycle shops to see if anyone recognized the character in the bike. With every step, the web they were spinning began to tighten. They could feel the tides of the investigation turning. Millbrook's shadows were beginning to reveal their secrets. And with renewed vigor, Sullivan and Green prepared to chase this new lead as darkness fell upon the town. The suspect. The following day began with a chilling sense of purpose as Sullivan and Green set off to scour local bike shops. The sun barely broke through the clouds, casting a somber gray blanket over Millbrook. Earlier reports had pointed to a potential suspect, and each second felt crucial as they moved from shop to shop. Had wheelie good bikes, an unassuming corner store where local cyclists gathered. Sullivan felt the weight of anticipation. As they approached the counter, a young man named Jake, the shop's owner, looked up expectantly, sensing their urgency. "We're investigating the recent murder of Abby Lawson," Sullivan stated, choosing his words carefully. "We're looking for a man who has been seen riding a red bicycle. Maybe someone who's been hanging around the area." Jake's face paled slightly as he motioned for them to follow him to the back of the shop. There, wedged between rows of dusty racks, was a rusty old red bike, its frame visible scars of wear and tear. "This one's been here a while. It was left out front last month, but I haven't seen its owner for a few weeks now." Sullivan and Green exchanged a glance. They instinctively knew they were edging closer. "Can you describe the guy who owned it?" Green inquired, leaning closer, as if willing the bike to impart its secrets. "He was a tall guy. Mid-20s, may have had some issues." Jake paused, searching for the right words. "Weird vibe, you know. Kept to himself, making everyone around him uneasy. He would come in, buy some tubes or whatever, and just leave. But this bike's been here since. Do you remember his name?" Sullivan pressed, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "His name was Leo, I think. He had several weird tattoo geometric shapes or something. Local kids wouldn't play near him when he was at the park. I always thought it was odd." But Jake trailed off, shaking his head. Guilt washed over him. "Where can we find him?" Sullivan asked urgently. Jake hesitated before responding. "Last I heard, he was staying at the Sunflower Motel, room 8. Be careful. The guy has a reputation." As Sullivan and Green exited the shop, the blood hummed in their veins. In the back of Sullivan's mind, red flags flared, the descriptions, the behavior, the connections, all leading back to Leo. What had started as an unsolvable mystery had suddenly shifted into a dire countdown with a potential suspect clearly in sight. They decided to visit the motel without delay. Sullivan felt an electric mix of trepidation and determination course through him as they approached the rundown establishment. But in Millbrook, where shadows once danced freely, it now felt as though they were on the edge of uncovering a truth that lurked far deeper than mere appearances. They were no longer searching for an answer. They were hunting a suspect. The trial months slipped by, and the atmosphere in Millbrook grew heavy with anticipation. As word of Abby Lawson's murder spread through town, the investigation unfolded like a dark storybook, revealing secrets that many had kept buried. Late-night whispers filled diners and coffee shops, while the tight-knit community constantly wrestled with fear and disbelief. Leo Hamlin, the man whose name had surfaced from the shadows, was arrested after Sullivan and Green pieced together sufficient evidence, witness accounts, surveillance footage of him near the park, and the critical discovery of Abby's personal item that had been stashed in the motel room where he was hiding. The case was quickly built, and now it was time for justice to take the stage. In the crisp courtroom air, the trial commenced with palpable tension. The judge presided over the proceedings, but attention swayed towards the prosecution and defense, each side poised to share their take on the chilling accusations. The atmosphere crackled as community members packed the gallery, eyes darting between the staunch defense and the composed prosecutor. The prosecution laid out a devastating case, detailing the circumstances of Abby's life, her kindness, and how it ultimately became her undoing. They painted Leo as a troubled figure A man whose past was marred by violence and erratic behavior. The statements from witnesses echoed within the courtroom walls, each recounting moments of unease and fear that had surrounded Abby's final days. Yet Leo's defense attorney mounted a confrontation, delving into claims of insufficient evidence and character issues. He argued that many in the courtroom had prejudged Leo, reducing him to nothing more than a scapegoat for the town's unease. As Leo sat stoically, twisting the rings on his fingers, some audience members felt their judgment waver. Was this man guilty or simply a product of his circumstances? Sullivan observed the trial closely, feeling the weight of every testimony and piece of evidence bartered back and forth. He could still envision the crime scene, the horror that had unfolded in the woods. As the days of testimonies unfolded, the emotional toll began to affect everyone involved. During the trial's second week, a vivid recollection of a key witness brought gasps from the audience. Linda, who had spoken to officers back in those pivotal first days, took the stand. Her voice trembled as she recounted the unease she felt from Leo's presence, relaying the eerie tension of Abby's last days. Each word felt like a knife piercing the room, striking against all who had been touched by Abby's life. Finally, in a moment that seemed to hang in the air, the prosecution presented the final piece of evidence, a surveillance video that caught Leo's bike outside the library earlier in the day of the murder, followed by Abby leaving work. It was undeniable. The tapestry of their lives had intersected in the most tragic of circumstances. As the trial reached its conclusion, the jury deliberating on the weight of their decision. Tension crackled in the air of Millbrook, the community suspended in a shared breath, waiting for justice to unfurl. The verdict, when it finally echoed through the court, shimmered with mixed emotions and tears, a testament not only to Abby's life, but to the resolve of a town forced to confront its demons and shadows. Justice would arrive, and with it, the hope that from tragedy, healing could perhaps begin. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, Millbrook began to seek a path to healing. The verdict had delivered a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow within the community. Leo Hamlin was found guilty of murder, sentenced to 25 years to life, a considerable punishment. Yet for many, it felt insufficient to absolve the weight of the pain Abby Lawson had left behind. Sullivan watched as the townspeople carried on, grappling with the aftermath of a wound that ran deep. The haunting memory of Abby lingered in their minds as they navigated their routines amid the palpable absence of the woman who had brought stories to life in the local library. In the first week of December, the town gathered to honor Abby's memory. The annual tree lighting ceremony, typically a festive occasion, transformed into a solemn tribute. They hung ornaments that were representative of her life, a miniature library, a charm resembling a heart, and a small red bicycle. Children carried candles as they circled the tree, illuminating the night with flickering lights, while the adults stood somberly at a distance, united in remembrance of a cherished soul lost too soon. Sullivan felt the heaviness in his chest as he stood among his fellow officers, each of them silently pondering the burden of their roles in safeguarding the town. They had turned the investigation into a mantra of respect for Abby, vowing to protect those that remained watchful of shadows in their midst. Despite the turmoil, the community found itself gradually shifting from fear to empower. Survivors of trauma began to speak up, breaking the silence around struggles with mental health. Local organizations sprung to life, offering resources to those in need, reaching out to victims and their family. The library, once a mere structure of books, transformed into a sanctuary of support and learning, hosting workshops to foster connections and promote safety. Sullivan, too, felt the sting of Abby's absence in the corridors of the station. He and Green took initiative to create a neighborhood watch program, encouraging residents to look out for each other, striving for a renewed spirit of vigilance. They believed that every interaction mattered, that communities could rebuild themselves stronger than before. Over time, the echoes of the tragedy softened, and while the scar of Abby's loss would remain, a new narrative began to unfold within the heart of Millbrook. The sense of vigilance and community spirit blossomed into a palpable force, a reminder that darkness could. As the year drew to a close, Sullivan gazed out towards the quiet streets, where laughter began to pierce the silence again. Millbrook was healing, perhaps even awakening once again, blooming under the promise of hope, as they ensured that Abby Lawson would never be forgotten. They would carry her memory forward, a guiding light beyond the shadow. Reflection. In the quiet moments that followed the ceremony, Sullivan often found himself reflecting on the delicate threads of life tangled in webs of fate and circumstance. Some evenings, perched on a bench overlooking the park where Abby once found joy, he would replay the events of the past months, contemplating the fragile lines that separated normalcy from chaos. His mind would wander to the many encounters he had with Abby's friends and family, those who had hugged him in tears, those who shared memories over coffee or floral tributes, each person carrying a piece of her spirit. Millbrook had been forever altered, and in that transformation lay a profound understanding. Even in the depths of sorrow, community could flourish, resilience could rise. He thought about his colleagues as well. The case had bonded them closer, forging friendships built on shared experiences of darkness. They had seen the impact of crime ripple through lives, and now they were determined to stand as pillars for the community, guiding it towards a safer, stronger future. With each passing day, as the chill of winter faded into the warmth of spring, Sullivan recognized a sense of peace beginning to blossom. The once silent streets now buzzed with life, the laughter of children a beloved reminder of hope. In those reflections, he found comfort knowing that, although Abby's laughter would never fill the air again, her love of stories, of connection, would linger long within Millbrook's heart, propelling it forward into the light.